A strip of meat clenched between your teeth, a sharp stone in your hand. You slice downward, again and again, leaving tiny scratches across your own front teeth. Now imagine this. Those scratches can tell someone 2 million years later which hand you used. And when scientists looked closely enough, they found something strange. Almost all of them leaned the same way. Long before writing, before farming, before cities, humans were already choosing sides. It's tempting to think handedness is just a quirk, a random preference, like which foot you kick with, or which side of the bed you sleep on. Maybe ancient humans just picked a hand and stuck with it. But that simple answer falls apart quickly, because no other primate does this the way we do. Chimpanzees and gorillas might favor one hand slightly, but as a group they stay inconsistent. Humans don't. Around 90% of us are right-handed. That's not randomness, that's a pattern, a deep one. The real question isn't why individuals prefer one hand. It's why an entire species aligned so strongly in the same direction. The obvious place to start is with tools. Early humans made them, used them, depended on them. It feels intuitive that once tools became essential, people might settle into a dominant hand for precision. And there is real evidence here. At Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, some of the oldest known Homo habilis fossils carry microscopic scratches on their front teeth. These marks formed when individuals held food in their mouths and sliced it with stone tools. The angle of those cuts consistently points to right-hand use. This was nearly 1.8 million years ago. Even then, a pattern had already emerged. But tools alone don't explain everything. If tool use created handedness, then we might expect earlier tool makers to show a gradual, messy mix before settling into one side. Instead, the signal appears surprisingly early and strengthens over time. And more importantly, other animals use tools too. Some primates use sticks to fish for termites or stones to crack nuts. Yet they never develop the same overwhelming population-wide bias. So tools might reinforce handedness, but they don't seem to create it from scratch. As the fossil record expands, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. Homo heidelbergensis, living hundreds of thousands of years later, shows the same right-leaning marks. Neanderthals, spread across Ice Age Europe and Asia, show it too. By that point, the bias is unmistakable. Not just individuals, but entire populations favoring the right hand. Whatever started this wasn't a late cultural habit. It was something deeper, something biological, building slowly across generations. This is where the story becomes more complicated. Because handedness isn't just about hands, it's about brains, specifically how the brain divides its work. In most humans today, the left hemisphere controls the right side of the body. That same hemisphere is also heavily involved in language processing. This overlap has led many researchers to suspect a connection. Not a coincidence, but a shared origin. As early humans developed more complex communication and tool use, their brains may have become increasingly specialized. One side taking the lead for fine control and sequencing. But that raises another question. Why would the brain specialize at all? Why not stay balanced? To answer that, you have to go back even further. Tens of millions of years, long before humans existed. Early primate ancestors were already showing signs of lateralization, subtle differences between the left and right sides of the brain. Around 30 million years ago, key reorganizations began shaping how these brains processed information. Then again, roughly 10 million years ago, in the lineage that would eventually split into humans and chimpanzees, more changes followed. The groundwork for asymmetry was already there. Humans didn't invent it, they inherited it. What they did was push it further. A recent study led by researchers at Oxford proposes that two major evolutionary shifts amplified this imbalance dramatically: walking upright and growing bigger brains. Bipedalism changed everything. When early hominins stood up and began walking on two legs, their hands were freed from locomotion. No longer needed for constant support, they became available for manipulation, carrying, throwing, shaping, cutting. The hands weren't just limbs anymore, they became tools themselves. At first, the preference may have been weak. Early species like Australopithecus likely had only a slight lean, not much stronger than modern apes. But as tool use became more complex, small differences started to matter. Precision improved survival. Consistency improved efficiency. If one hand was even slightly better, using it repeatedly would reinforce that advantage. Then came brain expansion. Species like Homo erectus and later Neanderthals didn't just have bigger brains, they had more specialized ones. As neural circuits grew, so did the benefits of dividing labor between hemispheres. One side could focus on language-like processing, sequencing actions, planning. The other could handle spatial awareness, broader perception. This division reduced redundancy and increased efficiency, but it also created a feedback loop. As the left hemisphere became more dominant for certain tasks, the right side of the body followed. And slowly, across hundreds of thousands of years, that small bias sharpened. There's a fascinating piece of supporting evidence in a tiny, distant branch of the human family tree. Homo floresiensis, often called the hobbit, lived on an isolated island in Indonesia. They were small, with significantly smaller brains than other human species of their time. And according to the same evolutionary modeling, they likely had a much weaker hand preference, not as strongly right-handed as us, not even as strong as Neanderthals. Despite using tools, their reduced brain size and partly arboreal lifestyle seem to have limited the development of strong lateralization. It's a reminder that handedness isn't just about what you do, it's about the kind of brain you have while doing it. By the time Homo sapiens emerged, the process was nearly complete. The vast majority of individuals were right-handed. Not because they consciously chose to be, but because their brains were wired that way from the start. Cultural factors may have reinforced it further, but the foundation was already biological, deep, ancient, and shared. Even today, left-handedness hasn't disappeared. Around 10 to 15% of people still favor the left, and researchers continue to debate exactly why this minority persists. Some suggest it may offer certain cognitive or strategic advantages. Others think it's simply the natural variation of a complex system. What's clear is that the overwhelming bias toward the right is not random. It's the result of millions of years of gradual change, shaped by movement, by tools, by brains that learned to divide and specialize. So how did ancient humans become left or right-handed? Not in a single moment, not by choice, but through a long chain of evolution where standing upright freed the hands, growing brains split their functions, and tiny advantages in control turned into species-wide patterns. Handedness is the visible trace of something invisible, the architecture of the human mind itself. And every time you pick up a pen, or a knife, or reach out instinctively with one hand instead of the other, you're not just making a preference, you're revealing a decision your brain started making millions of years before you were born.